Oh, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum guys, hope you're doing well. So today we are discussing about the cloud security with respect to Amazon Web Services. So we'll be focusing on the cloud security with regards to AWS. So let's get started. So what are we going to cover in this video? We're going to cover the overview of AWS cloud security, and then we will understand the shared responsibility model between the cloud provider and the customers. And then we will going to touch base some points from compliance and governance in AWS. And then we will focus on identity and access management, commonly known as IAM. Then we will understand the data security and encryption, and then we'll move into network security. And then we'll also dig a little deeper into monitoring, logging, and incident response, as well as we'll cover the infrastructure and application security, compliance and auditing, incident response, and data disaster recovery. And then we will focus on the infrastructure as a code, and also the CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And we'll then finally conclude this presentation. So let's get started. So first we'll cover on the overview of AWS cloud security. So we know that cloud security in AWS is of utmost importance due to the sensitive nature of the data and application that is hosted on the cloud platform. So to ensure strong cloud security in AWS, it helps us protect against the unauthorized access, data breaches, and other potentially security threats. So what are the key concepts and terminology that you should know with regards to AWS cloud security? So AWS cloud security involves understanding and implementing various key concepts and terminology related to security in the cloud environment. And some of the important terms include identity and access management, which is a service which is present in AWS IAM, and virtual private cloud, known as VPC, security groups, and network access control list, or NACLS. So let's talk about the shared responsibility model. So there is a shared responsibility between the customers and the cloud providers. There is some responsibility that falls into on the bucket of cloud service provider, in this case AWS, and there are some responsibility that lies with the customers who are using these services. So the shared responsibility model in AWS defined the division of security responsibilities between AWS and the customer. So AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud infrastructure, while customer is responsible for securing the applications and the data within the cloud. Let's also understand the security controls in shared responsibility. So under the shared responsibility model, AWS ensures the security of the underlying infrastructures, which include physical security, network security, and host level security. Now let's look into what are customers responsible for. So customers are responsible for implementing security controls at the application and data level, such as encryption, access control, and vulnerability management. Moving to our next topic of discussion, which is compliance and governance in AWS. So AWS offers a wide range of compliance program and certification to meet the industry-specific regulatory and compliance requirements. And some of these certifications include ISO 27001, GDPR, HIPAA, and PCI DSS, which demonstrate AWS commitment to data security and privacy. Let's talk about how this governance framework is implemented within AWS. So implementing governance framework in AWS helps organization ensure compliance, manage risk, and maintain strong security posture. Governance framework provide guidelines and best practices for managing resources, access controls, auditing, and monitoring in the AWS environment. Let's talk about the very important topic within the cloud security, which is the identity and access management, commonly known as IAM. So IAM overview and its best practices. So what are the things, services within the AWS which are comes under the IAM? So IAM have IAM roles, users group, and it follows the principle of least privilege and access policies and the MFA known as the multi-factor authentications. So IAM or identity access management is a crucial component of AWS cloud security that allows you to manage access to your AWS resources. So IAM roles, users, groups are entities which are used in AIM for granting and managing permission to AWS resources. Let's talk about the least privilege and access policies. So least privilege is a security principle that ensures users and entities are granted only permissions required to perform their specific task. Access policies define the permission and action that are allowed or denied for a particular IAM entity, such as user, group, or role. Moving on to our MFA, multi-factor authentication. So it adds an extra layer of security by requiring users to provide additional authentication factors such as unique code from a mobile app or in addition to their password. So MFA should be enabled for all IAM users, especially for those with administrative privileges to prevent unauthorized access. Let's talk about IAM security controls. So how do you what are the controls that you can implement within the AWS to have the IAM security control? So you can use IAM users and group policies. So IAM users and group policies allow fine-grained controls over access to AWS resources by defining the permissions and actions allowed or denied for specific users. Now, these policies are written in JSON format and can be attached to IAM users or groups to control their access. So what are IAM roles and instance profiles? So IAM roles are used to grant permission to entities outside um, of your AWS accounts, such as AWS services or application, excuse me, running on an Amazon EC2 instance. So let's talk about instance profile. So these are another features of IAM that allows an EC2 instance to securely retrieve temporary credentials from IAM roles which are assigned to it. So in summary, IAM roles is basically used to grant permissions to AWS services. It's not um, related to the IAM users per se. Let's talk about IAM Access Analyzer and Policies Evaluation. So IAM Access Analyzer is a service that helps you identify and resolve unintended access to your AWS resources by analyzing your IAM policies. It provides policy recommendation and allows you to review permissions granted by your policies to ensure they align with your security requirements. So we'll now look into the data security and encryption. So let's look into the overview of encryption. So encryptions are of various types and they use various algorithms. So what is encryption? So encryption is a process of converting plain text into ciphertext, which make it unreadable to anyone without proper authorizations. So AWS Cloud Security provides various encryption types and algorithms to help users protect their data from malicious attack. These include symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption as well as hashing algorithms and key derivation functions. So what is symmetric? Symmetric means you have the same key to encrypt the data and use the same key for decrypting the data. In asymmetric encryption, you use something, the idea of PKI, public key infrastructure, which is having two keys, one public key and another is a private key. So public key, you can share it with the people, but private key is something to keep it secure because if it is compromised, then your encryption isn't compromised. So a user can also choose the desired encryption strength with option ranging from 128-bit to 512-bit. Let's talk about AWS Key Management Services, or known as KMS. So AWS Key Management Services is a secure and scalable service that allow users to create, control, and manage the encryption key they use to encrypt their data. KMS integrates with various Amazon services such as S3, EBS, RDS through automated encryption and key management. KMS also allows users to generate, rotate, and revoke their encryption keys, make it easy to protect sensitive information even when the data is in transit or at rest. Let's talk about database security and encryption. So we have the two very famous services within AWS. These are your Amazon RDS, relational database, and the Amazon DynamoDB. So let's talk about that. How are these two database secured in AWS? So Amazon Relational Database Service, or known as RDS, they provide multiple security features to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of users' data. Users can encrypt their RDS instance with Amazon KMS to meet compliance requirement and protect sensitive data when stored in database. RDS also support virtual private cloud and AWS IAM rules for control access to the databases. Let's talk about Amazon DynamoDB. So Amazon DynamoDB offers serverless database that can store, retrieve any amount of data with high performance and flexibility. So users can enable encryption for their DynamoDB tables and indices using KMS and have secure access to the data through VPC and IAM roles. DynamoDB also offers fine-grained access control through ABAC, or known as attribute-based access control, which allows users to define granular permissions for their data. Let's talk about storage security and encryption. So the popular services which are used for storage are Amazon S3 and Amazon EBS. So Amazon S3 is basically Amazon's simple storage servers, which provide secure, durable, and scalable object storage for various types of data. Users can encrypt their data in transit as well as at rest with KMS, or they can use server-side encryption, which is known as SSE, making it easy to meet compliance and regulatory requirements. S3 also support access controllers and bucket policies for controlling access to the buckets and objects stored in them. Moving on to EBS, so Amazon Elastic Block Store, which provides block level storage volumes for use within AWS EC2 instance. Users can encrypt EBS volume using KMS and can have control over access their data through encryptions and the AWS IAM. EVS volumes also support snapshot encryption for backup and disaster recovery. Let's talk about network security. So, network security can be achieved using the VPC security, which is a virtual private cloud security. So, VPC architectures and components will understand them. So, a VPC or virtual private cloud is a logically isolated section of AWS cloud where you can launch resources. VPC architecture, they consist of subnets, route tables, internet gateways, NAT gateways, and virtual private gateways. Let's talk about the security groups and network access control. So security groups are virtual firewall that controls all the incoming and outgoing traffic at the instance level, whereas network access control are stateless firewall that control incoming and outgoing traffic at the subnet level. Let's talk about AWS Firewall Manager. So there is a centralized management for security policies. So AWS Firewall Manager is a service that allows central management of VPC security groups across multiple AWS accounts. So it helps to ensure consistent enforcement of security policy and simplifies management through a single console. Automating security groups rules with AWS Firewall. So AWS Firewall Managers also provide ability to automate the applications of security group rules using AWS web application firewall rules or pre-configured rules group. This automation reduces maintenance overhead and ensure that security groups remain up to date. Distributed denial of service protection. So AWS provides SIL standard and one services, um, which is a built-in service that provides DDoS protection at no additional cost to all the AWS customers. However, AWS SIL Advanced, which is a premium service that offers advanced distributed denial of service protection, threat intelligence, and DDoS response support. So what is this DDoS response support? So AWS offers DDoS response team, which support as a part of AWS Shield Advanced subscription. So this DRT provides DDoS response team. They will provide you 24/7 access to AWS security experts who can assist in the event of DDoS attack to help mitigate and prevent further damage. Alright, we covered the networking part. Let's talk about the monitoring, logging, and incident response. So, CloudTrail and CloudWatch are the two AWS services which are used for monitoring, logging, features within the AWS security. So, AWS CloudTrail can be used for auditing and compliance. The AWS CloudTrail is a service that enables governance, compliance, operational auditing, and risk auditing of AWS account activity. It logs AWS API calls made on your account and store them in Amazon S3 bucket for future analysis. So that was about Cloud Trail. Let's talk about AWS Cloud Watch. So AWS CloudWatch is a monitoring service that provides matrices and alarms for resources deployed in AWS infrastructure. It can be used for monitoring resources such as EC2 instances, RDS database, and Elastic load balancers. So let's talk about another two services of AWS, which are AWS Config and Security Hub. So AWS Config for is a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configuration of your AWS resources. It keeps tracks of changes to your AWS infrastructure and provides you a detailed view of its configuration history. Security Hub. So AWS Security Hub is a security services that helps in aggregate and prioritize security finding from various AWS services. It provides you with a comprehensive view of security postures and central location for managing security compliance. Incident response in AWS. So preparing for incident response plan. So having an incident response plan in a documented and tested, and also to test out the procedure design to detect, respond, and recover from security incident. It is of important to have a well-documented incident response plans in place before a security incident occurs. So let's talk about incident detection and containment. So AWS provides several services and tools to help detect and contain security incidents such as Amazon Guard Duty and Amazon AWS WAF, which is the web application firewall. So it is important to have a thorough understanding of these services and tools in order to effectively detect and contain security incident in AWS. Let's talk about the infrastructure and application security. So secure serverless applications, let's talk about them. So AWS Lambda security best practices. So make sure regularly update and patch dependency. Keeping dependency up to date helps protect against known vulnerabilities. Regularly review, update a dependency using your Lambda function. Implement least privilege model, follow the principle of granting and least amount of privileges necessary for a function to carry out its intended purpose, which restrict access permission to only the required AWS resources. Let's talk about API gateway security. So it enables authorizations, authentication, implement authentication mechanism such as IAM, Cognito, or custom authorizer to control access to your APIs. Apply authentication across stages of API request, implement throttling and rate limiting, protect your API from abuse and DDoS attack by implementing throttling and rate limiting mechanism. Define the limit based on the expected usage patterns. Let's talk about the container security. So container image vulnerability scanning. So regularly scan container image. You can use services like Amazon ECR or third-party tools to perform vulnerability scans on container images, identify and remediate any discovered vulnerabilities before deploying containers. Implement image signing and verification. Use container image to ensure authenticity and integrity of images. Verify signatures before deploying containers to prevent tampered or compromised images. So another ways of having security within containerization is having a network segmentation and access control. So use network security groups and VPC security group and VPC to isolate containers and control the inbound and outbound traffic, as well as utilize and implement network access control to add an additional layer of security at the subnet level. So we can define inbound and outbound rules to restrict network traffic to necessary and approved resources. Let's talk about secure infrastructure deployment. So AWS Cloud Permissions, it allows permissions through least privileges when defining the IAM roles and policies for cloud formations. So restrict permissions only to required actions for cloud formation stacks. Enable cloud trail for cloud formation. Enable AWS Cloud Trail to log and monitor cloud formation API calls and activities. It provides visibility into stack changes and helps detect any unauthorized or unexpected modification. AWS Elastic Bean Security, so make sure you apply IAM roles and permissions with least privilege to limit access to Elastic Bean. Enable instance level security, implement security group, network access control, and VPC to control inbound and outbound traffic to Elastic Bean instances. Apply security patches and update security regularly. Let's talk about compliance and auditing. So AWS Artifact is a platform which provides various compliance report for AWS services. You can use this report through AWS Management Control or using AWS API. So once you access the AWS Artifact report, you can review the report to understand how compliant you are with policies and regulations. So how do you navigate through the compliance report in AWS? So AWS provide various compliance reports such as SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI, ISO, etc. You can navigate through this report by using the search functionality in the AWS Management Console. You can also use the AWS API to retrieve and navigate through this report programmatically. Auditing and security assessments. So conducting security assessment in AWS. So AWS provide various security assessment tools such as Amazon Inspector, Amazon Guard Duty, Security Hub, and etc. These tools help in identifying security vulnerabilities within your AWS environment. You can also conduct manual security assessment by reviewing and analyzing log configuration to ensure security of your AWS resources. AWS Config is a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configuration of your AWS resources. You can create custom AWS config rules to enforce compliance policy and conduct security assessment. After generating the AWS config rule, you can analyze the result and take necessary action to remove the non-compliance resources. Let's talk about incident response and disaster recovery. So having an AWS backup services. So AWS backup service is a fully managed backup service that make it easy to centralize and automate the backup. It simplifies the backup routine by automating backup scheduling, data retention policies, and enable fast data recovery when needed. Automating backup and restoring processes. So automating backup and restore process in AWS can be achieved using various methods such as the AWS Lambda function, AWS Cloud Formation. So by leveraging this mechanism, backup and restore process can be scheduled, triggered, and performed automatically to ensure reliable and efficient backup strategy. Let's talk about disaster recovery planning. So AWS disaster recovery provide disaster recovery options as well as building a disaster recovery plan. So AWS provide multiple disaster recovery options, and having a disaster recovery plan um, helps you easy with the disaster recovery strategy when disaster occurs. Let's talk about infrastructure as a code. So AWS Cloud Formation allows the management of infrastructure resources as code, enables consistent, repeatable deployment. So by defining this template using Cloud Formation, infrastructure can be provisioned and managed in an automated and controlled manner. So how do you implement IAC control? So when implementing infrastructure as a code, it is important to incorporate security control directly into the template. This can be done by leveraging the AWS Cloud Formation features such as AWS input validation, fine-grained permissions, as well as secure parameter handling. So let's talk about CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment. So implementing secure account permissions and reviewing the updating the pipeline configuration using encryption and sensitive data and artifacts. So these are the strategies by which you can secure your CI/CD pipelines in AWS. Let's talk about automated security testing and vulnerability scanning. So automatic security testing and vulnerability scanning can be integrated into your CI/CD pipeline to detect another security issue early in the development process. So tools like AWS Code Pipeline, third-party services can be used for static code analysis, dependency scanning, penetration testing, and vulnerability assessment. So let's recap what we studied in this presentation. So having a multi-factor authentication, this is the authentication process where user is granted access only after successfully providing two or more authentication factors to verify their identity. Some MFA options available AWS include SMS, authentication apps, hardware token, as well as voice calls. Network security. AWS provides several network security features that include security groups, network access controls, and web application firewalls. These features are designed to control traffic between instances, subnet, and network segment. So, what is the next step for implementing AWS Cloud Security Control? So, use AWS Security Assessment as it provides several security assessment tools that are designed to help our organization evaluate their security postures and make informed decisions on security controls. These tools include security audit checklists, security best practices, and security benchmark reports. Implement AWS Security Services provides several security services that can help organizations improve their security posture. These include AWS Identity and IAM, AWS Key Management Services, CloudTrail, Config, GuardAT. So by implementing these services, organizations can enhance their security postures and better understand their security. So that's it for this video, guys, and I'll see you guys in another video. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.